going to deal with a little bit of rust on the Maestro today. From that big stash of parts that Peter gave me, which we're still working through, there were a couple of doors. One of them is much better than the ones on the car, and one, although it's rust free, does have a big nasty dent in it, which is a shame, but that will help with some repairs later anyway. Well, let's crack on then. All of the doors on the Maestro have got filler in them, and it's quite a lot. This is the door that we're going to replace. You can see the filler's already coming off on its own. The front doors are also quite bad, with the corners all having blown. The driver's door is probably the worst one of the lot. To get to the bolts for this door, you open this door, and you can see there are two at the top and one at the bottom. We'll undo those and then the door should just come off. 13mm socket on these. So I'll just loosen all three first. Oh, tell a lie, there is four, there's two in the bottom here. Okay. Now, because the door's shut, hopefully what will happen, I'll take these out and the door won't really move until I undo that. Should have really wound that window down though. That'll just make this easier to pick up in a minute. There we go. Little bolts, and they've got like a non-threaded bit to help locate it in the door pillar. That will be a shim. Surprised there were any. I think that came out the top. Yes, it did. So I must remember, if any shims do come out, pop them back in where they came out. And that's how easy those are to take off. Putting them back on my own might be tricky, so let's find out. This door is missing its handle up here, but we'll deal with that in a minute. Right, just got these two bolts started at the top, and then we'll drop the shim back in. I'm not sure if I need it or not on these doors, but we'll use that as our starting point and see how we go. I'm not going to tighten it all the way. Right, that's just loosely on for now. So needs a bit more adjustment yet. Let's see. That's about right at the front. So it's level. No, that might be okay. I found my trim tool. Hooray! Didn't bother recording taking this off, I've done it a few times now. I peeled back the membrane. I don't see any signs of anybody being in here before, so that's good. The other thing I noticed is a lot of these return edges on this door are actually in better condition than the one I've just put on the car. So I think I'm going to actually repair this one off the car, which will be a lot easier, and we'll just swap the original door back on. That's a bit of a surprise. I thought that all of this down here would be pretty poor, but in fact this is really the only problem area on this corner. So that should clean up really well. I'm quite happy about that. For the door handle, to remove it, there's a bolt here, and if you go through this little hole here, there's another bolt hiding in there somewhere. The other thing is you need to unhook this wire from this mechanism. That wire is still present in the spare door on the car, but the mechanism isn't. So I'm going to unbolt these. It is a 10mm socket on these ones, and hopefully it's not going to fight us too badly. One handle removed, and on the back of the bolts there's a nut and a little washer, so just make sure you don't drop that in the door, and you have to lift the handle to get the mechanism to be as in line with it as you can. It's a bit of a fiddle, but you can do it. Now this handle has been feeling a bit not great on the car, and they do have a reputation for snapping, and it looks like this one isn't far off. I do have some spares, but I'm just going to put this one on the spare door, and then I'll get one of my better spares out and we'll fit that when I put the repaired door back on. I think that's going to be the best solution here. Found the moisture membrane scrunched up, so I've done a mediocre job of reinstalling that. Also found there is a little bit of adjustment here in the doorstop, which is great. I'm going to wind this window down and see if this fits a bit better now. Just makes it easier to open and close the door if it's a bit stuck. I think as well this latch is a bit gummed up, so I'll put some lubricant in there. It looks like it's got some old dried grease in it, which certainly won't be helping. Tiny bit of tweaking on that latch, some WD-40, and it opens as well as it ever did and shuts nicely. This door's always been a bit like this. Not this particular door, but the one that we've replaced. It's always been a bit sort of sticky. Don't know why, just is. I'm going to do the same with the other side. I think I'll just swap the other one over. We've seen the process here, so I'll just show you that when it's done. But I think that is a job okay. It's borderline good enough. What's really sad about this door is there's no rust in it at all, except for here where the paint's been knocked off. And if I remember rightly, this happened before I got it, before Peter got it, while it was in storage, and it was an otherwise perfect door. Opens and shuts lovely, didn't need to do any fiddling about with it, and it really does, you know, it opens and shuts just great. Yeah, what a shame. Summer's here. Got the gazebo up, got a little working space here. We did a tip run in the Maestro recently and cleared a lot of rubbish, which was fantastic. It's a great car for that. I want to investigate these doors that we've got to see exactly what repair works ahead of me. I think a couple of them are repairable, so that would be great, but I'm not sure. So let's see how much filler we've got in everything and get this cleared off. Now I'm probably not going to do any welding today. Might happen in this video, but definitely not today. It's too hot to be putting on all of the PPE required for that. So we're just on cleanup today and we'll see what we're dealing with. This is the rear passenger side door, and overall it's really not that bad. This trailing corner is in pretty good shape apart from the paint obviously, and although there's a little bit of bubbling coming through on the back, it's really minor. The big problem is the leading edge here, and it's been filled quite a bit for quite a long time by the looks of it. but it doesn't seem to come back any further than this. So I think, given this is a fairly flat square piece, this is probably very repairable. The rest of the door's in really good condition. Minor blemish here from probably a stone chip, but I'll probably have to repaint everything from this line down anyway. Not a big deal. I'm just going to focus on cleaning this up and seeing what we're dealing with. I mean, even this edge here, you can see there's some blistering in the paint, but it's not terrible. It's all very rescuable. Most of the door is actually in reasonable shape, and there isn't the usual rust blebs up on here that you get with these doors. So I do think it's worth saving, providing this isn't really much worse than it looks. That's not terrible. I mean, yes, there is a massive piece of filler there, but the rust only comes back here, and most of it is just surface under the paint, so this should clean up really well. Get something to knock that off. Definitely got some cutting back to do, but it's not terrible. That's very repairable. Since I've got the other door to work as a template, I can cut this away and not really worry about it. I've got reference on the other door. Not cleaned anything out yet, so this is what causes the problem. When you get that bubbling on the corners, moisture gets in between your outer layer and your inner layer and then pushes everything out as the rust expands, and that's all that's caused the problem here. Of course, loading it up with filler, well, that just absorbs more moisture, so it makes the problem worse. So what was probably just a little bit at this bottom corner has been made a little bit worse. But the frame in here is actually in pretty good shape. Obviously I've got to rebuild this lip, I've got to clean back to wherever the good metal is. The outer skin really isn't bad. This panel has a very, very slight curve to it in one direction, and I don't think it has much, if anything, in the other direction. So it should be a very simple repair, and I can pattern off the door on the car. That will give me the shape and the overlap I need to rebuild this. And I can use the old bonnet that I took off the car that was damaged, because same thickness of steel, it's in reasonable quality, and that will patch straight in there for me. Clean this up, I think. The blistering up here, again, is surface rust. This is probably moisture from the back, so I shall probably cut this section out as well, just to get in there and make sure it's dealt with. These bits, they're just stone chips. You can see with where they are and how they're created, they're just little stone chips. So I will hit those with a wire wheel, and once they're as clean as I can get them, we shall rust treat them and then paint them, and that will deal with that. This corner here is in really good shape. I don't really have any concerns here. Same treatment, wire wheel, bit of rust treater, some fresh paint. There's some gouges which Might be from the repairs I did on the arch, might be from the repairs that were done there before I got the car, but they're very, very minor. A bit of filler will deal with that. Yeah, no, this door is very, very salvageable. I'm quite pleased about that. On the back of the door, this corner, nothing to do. I probably didn't even need to hit it with a flat wheel, but it looked a bit bubbly, and it wasn't. So that just needs some paint on it. Over here on the bad corner, again, it needs cutting back a bit further than this, obviously, but it's fairly solid on this face, and the biggest problem was some badly applied paint up here, which had flaked, and it has some surface rust, so wire wheel will sort that. And the only surprise was just a little hole here, so I'll just need to give this a bit of a clean out and give that a blob of weld. Doesn't look like this has been repaired. You can see that the inner frame, you've got your flange that folds over, and it's just rotted away here. So it just needs the flange cutting away and a new section letting in. That's not too bad. Yeah, that one's very repairable. It is definitely too hot to be welding today, but so I don't waste the time, I'll dig the other one out and we'll see what we're left with on that, because that one's a lot worse. My choices with this door is either to try and repair the rust in this one, or knock the dents out in the other one. This one doesn't have dents and has a lot of rust, and the other one has some massive dents and no rust at all. So we have stone chip damage and repair here, quite a few. This corner's a mess. It's much, much worse than the other door, but you never know, maybe it's just been very badly overfilled. Again though, there's no rust along this lip, so that's good. That can be difficult to repair. And a lot of the edges under here are really good too. It's just, this corner's just terrible. Whatever the touch-up paint was that they used on this, it just gums up the flat wheel, as you could see there, really quickly, and as soon as there's any heat into it, it just kind of smears. That's going to be awful to clean off. However, there are some good things here. A lot of these big ugly blemishes that were there are really just from stone chips. So like with the other door, a lot of these will just want a little bit of wire brush, rust converter and fresh paint, and they'll be fine. Even the trailing edge here isn't that bad. May need a tiny repair when I clean that back more thoroughly, but honestly, that seems okay. This front corner, it's actually better than I thought it was going to be. I thought there'd be a lot less metal here. It is a big repair, but it might be less work than knocking the dent out that other door. It's really borderline. I've got a feeling this door's probably worth saving at this point. It's if it was much further gone it might not be, but right now it's only that little bit there that needs doing. The rest of it's actually really solid. So I think, as with the other door, we'll cut this corner off, because of course I can template from the other doors I've got, and we'll see what's behind, and if the frame's too bad, that will be the deciding factor, I think, here. But it might be a salvageable door. Well, that was a surprise. Chop back the really ugly bit. That's the easy bit to repair. And the bit I was concerned with is this curved piece here can be quite difficult to replicate. And I wasn't sure how much metal was left, but actually most of what was here was just minor surface crust from the back of this. So that is very repairable. And with the skill set I have, it might be easier for me to repair this door than try knocking out the dents in the other one. Certainly all of these other blemishes, they're just cosmetic paintwork stuff. There's no welding required on any of that, so I think it's worth repairing this door. I think it would make more sense for what I'm doing to fix this one than to try and knock out the dent in this one. The other advantage to not using this door is it is a different red, because they use different reds through the years on the cars. So although this is rust free, that dent in the paint colour is going to be a bit of a nuisance, whereas if I repair the one over there, it'll match. I can paint the black stripes in like I did when I did the rear arches. It's not going to be too terrible, and I suspect that a lot of this on the front doors down here is going to be the same sort of deal. The only annoying thing with the front doors is I don't have a spare set to put on the car while I repair the ones on the car. So that's a little bit more awkward, but yeah, I think we'll repair the originals. I think that makes more sense. And then we'll go from there. It's warm again, and I'm not really wanting to do this, but it needs to be done. So let's just crack on and ignore the heat. Already made a start on the rear passenger door, and I've done the small repair here at the rotted house, and I've got the inner skin welded on here as well. I'm not welding from this side, I'm only welding from the other side, and I'll put some seam sealer in here just to make that nice and secure. Reason being, I don't have any tools that will get in here and clean things up, so I'm having to do a bit of a compromise. These hinge brackets, they don't actually come off without like unwelding them, which I don't want to do. The repair's going very quickly. Unsurprisingly, it's a very simple shape. I'll spin the door over and I'll show you the other side. What I'm using to repair this is the skin off the old bonnet that used to be on the car. It's the same grade of steel, and most of it's actually in pretty good shape. There's no rust in there, so that's a good solution. And that gave us this piece here, and because these doors are just squares, all I need to do is follow the line from the inner door frame here straight across, and then the same at the top. So it's a very straightforward repair. Again, the welding line here, that will probably remain quite messy. I'll grind back what I need to for the door skin to sit flush, but because of my limited tools, I can't get in very tight areas. So I'm going to just have to compromise a little bit on my approach. It will be fine though, it's better than all the filler and the rust that was in here. Doing the outer skin is going to be very easy, I think. The other thing I did off camera is I dealt with all of the rust blemishes that were on this door. Now obviously I've done a sloppy job, I've gone over the tape and all that, but I just wanted it covered up because I can deal with this when it's on the car a lot easier than when it's on the bench here. So the idea is do all the repairs, get some paint on it, and then get it on the car for the final finishing, because I can do things like paint the stripe back on, I can put more force in because the shape of everything means it's all very mobile, so it's not ideal. First thing to do on a job like this is figure out your alignment. Now, as I mentioned, luckily this is very square, which is great. There's no curves or complicated shapes to worry about. So you can just use a piece of paper. I've just used some A4 paper. And I've folded what will be the return for this panel based on what the thickness of the return is on the original. This allows you to then line up with your panel, and you've already got that turnover, so you can compensate for that when you make your panel. This will make it easier in a bit. Then you just figure out where your edge is, which I've already cut out. If you've got a dirty finger, great, you will then be able to use it as like a pen. If not, you can do it this way and it leaves a bit of a mark on the paper. And of course, you can also use a marker pen. And this is just your first sketch for your shape. Now, I always cut just a little bit bigger than I need it to be, because I can then trim my panel down if I need to. Perfect. You can drop that back in there. And actually the pen line that I'd made was pretty much spot on, which is great. I'll just give this another trim. And the fold line there helps us locate it. And that is good enough for a pattern. When you do your metal panel, don't forget to fold your paper out flat, cut it out to all the outside edges, and then you can bend this edge here almost all the way around, because that will then slot on and hold everything in place while you weld it. At least usually. These jobs always go a bit better when you remember which way round to blend your folds. So I bent this the wrong way and straightened it out, and I've just been tweaking it into place. Now, I didn't realise there was as much curve as there is, so as I've been trying to bend this to actually fold it to lock things in, it's been flattening it out too much. So I'm just going to leave it with a roughly 90 or so degree bend there, and that will just help keep it on the panel where I want it. Weld it onto the door skin as usual, and then I can lock this in. That'll help tighten everything up, and it should mean I get a nice smooth finish here with minimal filler. But we shall see. Oops, I finished it, pretty much. The welding went okay, and the edge turning as usual went okay. It will definitely need some filler. Not much, nowhere near the level it had when I started, so that's fine. Actually dressing this edge over is mostly perfectly fine. I'm going to do a little bit more work on it, but when you get to the hinge here, it's very difficult because it gets quite tight at this point. And before I was using a dolly and a hammer on either side of the panel, but I can't get a dolly or a hammer in there, so it was a case of using pliers and screwdrivers and just basic hand strength and just trying to squash everything in so that it's nice and tight. When this goes on the car, I can then fiddle with alignment. Now you can see there's a bit of a dip here I need to deal with, but this is all fairly thin metal, so it does actually bend and shape how you want it to. So I will clean this up, and before I do any filler work, it'll go on the car. We'll fiddle about with alignment and if this corner needs tweaking and that sort of thing when it's on the car. For now, I just need to take off the bobbly welding there, and yeah, one down, effectively, one to go. So we've got the little repair in here with some fresh primer on it. That doesn't really need anything else, just needs a coat of paint. And then we've got the bigger repair, which is this corner. You can see it's not great, is it? But it'll do. Unfortunately, what's caused this, where it's a little bit distorted, particularly up here, is I wasn't quite patient enough, and I went a little bit quick, so I've introduced too much heat into the panel and I've warped it slightly. I've dressed out what I can with the tools I have. If I had better access inside and a better dolly for that, I could probably get it a bit further than this, but I don't, so I can't. It will have to do, and filler will hide the problems here, but it is a lot better than it was. That's the key thing. It's not, you know, a big lump of filler waiting to fall off. That is a lot more presentable. The repairs on the driver's side rear door are slightly different. So instead of it being this area up here that's rotted out, it's a little bit down here. So I'm going to have to repair these sections and these sections before I do this piece here. I don't have the tools to make this piece all in one, so as we did on the other door, I'll do like a big triangle sort of shape here once I've repaired the frame. Treat your two planes as different panels, and you tend to be able to get a slightly nicer finish when you're limited on your tools. First stage of the repair done. That went very smoothly, to be honest with you. I slowed down a bit so we didn't get much distortion here. Also, it's a curved piece, which always helps. This one was a bit of a nuisance. I could have chopped the skin off and peeled everything back and done a more involved job, and I'd have got a nicer result, but It's right underneath the door where you never see, and once it's sealed and painted, it's not going to be a problem. So I think that will do for that particular area. It's one that somebody can come back and do if it gets worse in the future. Yeah, it is hot and it's getting hotter, and this isn't being very fun, but we are nearly finished. I'm trying not to rush. When I get overheated like this, I tend to rush a job, so I'm trying not to do that, trying to slow down, but just the ambient temperature itself is making it difficult to keep things cooled down. Everything is just hot, even working in the shade. Let's have a look at where we are. As I just showed you, this section here is all done, and you can see we've got some decent penetration here for the second piece. One thing I did have to do was just turn the edge with a pair of pliers. It was just a little bit too tall, and that gave me a slightly better surface for doing this section. And I couldn't use the paper templates from the other side because this is rotted further that way and less that way, and it's just a bit bigger than the template. So I had to make new ones, but not the end of the world. It's a very simple shape, this. I'm going to let this cool down and get a drink. It's very, very easy to get dehydrated doing jobs like this. And when I come back, I will clean this weld up here. I'll make sure that this panel is as proper shaped as it should be, because what happens is when you cut the edge off, this wants to sort of dip inside the door, and that was part of the problem I was having on the other side. I might take this step out and just run this line across. It can make for an easier patch to make. I'll see when I come to actually making it. All cleaned up and ready to go. Let's see if we can weld this in without too much distortion. I did decide to just keep the step in here. It made not much difference just cutting across and making different patches, so it's fine, it'll do. Next thing to do is figure out just where to clamp onto this door, because a lot of my points I would normally are covered in paint, and I want to keep them covered in paint, so I might clamp up here. This side went a lot better. Somehow I managed to control the heat better in the panel. Maybe it was the shape that I was using, maybe I was just going slow enough, I'm not sure. What I'm happy about is there is a lot less work to do on this one than there is on the other one. There is a little bit of hollowness in this repair. That's just the nature of the job. It's difficult to get in and do anything about it while you're doing it, but overall I'm quite happy with that. That's one job out the way and done. They look a lot better, and as you can hear in the background, the little princess is running. I still haven't sorted the brakes out on this. I'm not sure where we are with the video releases or anything, but I'm having trouble sorting the rear brakes out. Once that's sorted, she'll be fine. Running on very old fuel at the moment. But no, fires up first turn of the key, no complaints, which is great. I need to be using this car. I have sealed up with some seam sealer the repair work on here. Got some paint on the inside. I've got the door on the car. This side, really good. I had to tweak this bottom corner down here just a little bit. But other than that, that door's actually pretty good. Ready for putting all the trims on, sorting out the paint. Brilliant. This side, not so much. It didn't want to go back on as easily as the other side for some reason. I've got an adjustment down here, not on the door, but on the sill. You can see where it's just rubbing the skim of filler there, so I need to just knock that back a bit. I'm pretty sure this isn't the door, because this part of the door I didn't have to repair, so that's all original. But this is all stuff that I've done. The other bigger problem is our door gap. Now, I know British Leyland Rover, they weren't renowned for great panel gaps, but that's bad even by their standards. And of course, when I shut this door, all of this filler on this corner cracked and came off. So yeah, I know that I was going to have this job, I just didn't want this job today. What I need to do is mark out this panel gap all the way to the bottom of the repaired door, chop off the excess and weld it back up. It's not a big job, but it's just a bit irritating. I did think I might have an alignment issue somewhere because of the way I had to repair them. Yeah, I just didn't really want to do any welding today. Oh well. And of course, the leading edge of the passenger door here, rust has also been falling off, and part of the reason for that is they'd used some cardboard inside the door and then covered that in filler, and the cardboard was absolutely soaked. Didn't need to trim off very much, just this very corner. The angle on the pattern piece must have been just off, but remember, everything was all just filler and rust and out of shape. This now just leaves me with this edge here. You can see the door skin and then the other skin, which is where this folds round. There's still a good bit of meat left there, so I can just weld up this edge and then just grind it all smooth with a flat wheel, and that will effect a decent repair. I will have to reseal the back and repaint that, but again, not a problem. I can get to that with it on the car, which is how we shall do it. I'm going to have to get in the garage to do this, so this might be one of those jobs where I sort of do some other stuff and come back to it, but we'll see. Everything's a bit, well, it's difficult to put cars anywhere at the moment because they've been digging up the street recently again, and yeah, I'll see if we can have a shuffle, figure something out here. I've got everything as far as I can go, but unfortunately the weather is turning. I'm not going to get this job done today because of that. It has been a battle this last month trying to get anything done. Fillers on, ready for sanding back. The door edge is welded up. It's not my best work, but it'll do. This corner sorted out, just waiting for paint. And the same again on this side, just a bit of filler work there. Didn't really need much this side, to be honest, which is good. It's a couple of days later and the weather has cleared up, which is nice. And I've got the second lot of filler on here just drying. Door handles back on. And I don't have any cavity wax, so I'm using some underseal, which I think will be perfectly fine in here. So the repairs are up here, and I've just done the entire bottom of the door. If it's good enough to keep the bottom of a car rust proof, it should be fine in the bottom of these doors. And it just means everything will drain out properly. We should be fine. I've done the other side as well. And yeah, I'm just waiting on filler drying now before I can do anything else. So until that's done, I'm a bit stuck. Profile isn't terrible. It's not body shop smart, but it will do for this car, and there's no rust there, so that's the important bit. On this side again, we've got the filler here just for the minor dents and warping from that repair, and you can see where previously I've just thrown some paint on to stop those rust blebs from flashing back again, and now I just need to use the toffee wheel, which is a weird thing because it's both really aggressive and not at all. I had an experiment on here with the fresh paint from the wheel arch repair to take off a smudge from, I guess, some rubber or something, and went straight through the paint. So do be careful with this, because if you're not, it will go straight through fresh paint. This is really old paint on here, so it shouldn't be a problem. I'm not by any means an expert using these. I just read forum posts, watched some videos, and then found when I was using it on the car that almost none of it applied, as is often the way. So I'll just show you how I'm tackling this. One thing that's fairly common that people say is don't keep it in one place, it will get hot and damage the paint. I will definitely agree with that. So you do kind of have to keep moving, and when it's a new disc like this one, the edges are very square and it can just be a little bit difficult to get it started. Now this one's a bit rounded off from doing that one door, it's a bit easier, and I found if you put it on sort of an angle like that and work your way along, it tends to be okay. Right, let's see what happens and see how well I do on camera. That's the other problem. It can be quite difficult to control because it grabs. Like the plastic here, you're melting and it's grabbing it. This is rubbery and it's melting and grabbing. So you have to try different angles of attack to see what suits for what you're doing. The other problem I have with this is because this is grabbing at different rates depending on what's on the door, it can be very difficult to control the speed of the actual drill that you're using. But you get there eventually. When you're stripping this off, you'll find this sort of granular stuff. That's actually this disc disintegrating because it does wear down as you go. On here, because there's overspray over the vinyl, you'll see it's munching through some of that. The black is the vinyl, and then this sort of cloudiness is the glue on the back of the vinyl tape. And that's what makes a lot of the smudgy marks on here. Don't try and cut through all of it and make this pristine on your first pass. This panel's already a little bit warm here, so I need to move back and just work away from this zone, because if you work in one zone too much, you'll burn this adhesive into the paint, and then you will have real problems getting rid of that. I can't say this is my favourite thing in the world to do. It's like all of the bad aspects of machine polishing. The other thing that's not helping is this door has had paint before, and whatever paint they used is very gummy and it melts a little bit. I've had this problem before as I've been working on the car, and I'm encountering a little bit of that on here, so it's this is why the black's smudging down the way it is. Yep, I'm just going to plod away at this, and I'll bring you back when it's done and I've got everything cleaned up and ready for paint. Well, that took rather longer than expected. It wasn't just the residue from the toffee wheel that I had to deal with, but there was a lot more paint and repaints on this door than I was expecting, and I've had to just clean everything back with thinners and get back to the original paint. And of course the areas that I've repaired and the old touch-ins where there was rust coming through that I've also dealt with. This side wasn't too bad. This side was awful. And of course the damage goes a lot further up. The damage actually goes up into the scallop of the door up here rather than just being in the bottom. The other problem is the weather is threatening to turn on me just at the point where I could do with it not doing. I've masked everything off and I'm only going to paint the bits that need paint. I know properly you would do a full door respray on this. I don't have the means or the tools, so we'll just have to do it this way and hope the wind doesn't blow all the paint away. I think I've just beaten the weather. Couldn't it fine on this one, but it's good enough. It's not a great job, I do accept that. And sometimes that's just the way it is. I can't really be investing in a full respray on this car. I've just got to do my best with the materials and the time that I have available. So, I mean, the rest of the paint on this car is pretty bad anyway. One interesting thing that might make life easier later, I'm not sure if the camera can pick it up, but there is the ghosting of the original vinyl on here where the paint behind hadn't faded. I'm not going to put those stripes on today. I'm going to wait till this paint's hardened a little bit before I do that, so that I don't risk just peeling it straight off when I do my masking. So yeah, definitely not going to win any shows, but certainly good enough for what this car is.